Good afternoon and welcome to the Athens Planning Commission. It is Thursday, August 18th at, 12:05, somewhere thereabouts. But calling this meeting to order, we do have a quorum for the first time. Well, we've had a quorum, but all of us are here, all of the planning commissioners. We do have one individual here, and so if you are, I'm assuming you're going to speak to the commission? Okay. Just raise your hand. Do you solemnly swear that you're going to tell factual information before the board today?
I do, I will.
All right. Thank you. Disposition of the July 21st minutes. Everyone has them in their packets. Hopefully you've had a chance to look them over beforehand.
I took a look at them, and I will move that they be accepted as presented.
Second.
Okay. On this, in looking at it, Director Stone, you were not present, so you will abstain. Thank you. Hearing no further comments, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right. The minutes have been adopted. We have two cases today. The first case that we have before us is case 22-03. This is Title 41, University Estates Medical Office Building. Director Riggs, if you would like to speak to that.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the Planning Commission. On behalf of the appellant, I'd request to move this case to the September meeting so they can fully develop the plans and provide the responses to this board.
Okay.
We shouldn't have even parked.
Any questions from the commissioners?
No.
Okay.
You've not got anything else yet from the...
I have not received anything else. We did go to the Shade Tree Commission last week, and it was preliminarily approved based on some site visits that they were going to do, but they did preliminarily recommend approval to the landscaping plans from that meeting.
Can you repeat the date on that again? September,
I don't know.
the date at which we're moving it to?
The first meeting in September?
First meeting in September.
Thanks.
That's good enough. that works for me. Since it is showing up on our agenda as a case, we should probably call a vote and, someone like to make a motion to...
So I'll move that we table that until the next meeting when a representative can be present and also get some additional information to the code office.
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, it has been tabled and moving to the first meeting in September. Case number 22-04. This is the Madison Heights zoning change request by Diversified Properties.
Thank you, sir. This is a request to rezone two parcels, vacant land from R1 to R2. Diversified Properties has recommended the change based on conforming with the existing neighborhood and highest and best use of the property.
John Soul, would you like to speak on this, or at least be here to be on the podium to answer any questions?
Good afternoon, John Soul, Diversified Properties. I think Jim and I addressed everything last meeting with everybody, and back here, just I guess to answer any further questions, or I think there was a certain process that had to be accommodated over the last few weeks to like a public notification. So maybe you want to address that if there was any comments or. So we took care of that, and I think we're ready to move forward. Once again, if there are questions.
So just to refresh my memory, the two front pieces are R3.
That's correct.
There are a string of R1s on the back. You're proposing to move the one closest to Madison Avenue and the middle one to R2. Is that correct? Or is it all gonna be R2, all three, all of those R1s?
There are two R1s
Okay.
in the back.
Okay, so it looks like 3 on my map, but
Well, the third one, which is that long finger,
yes,
that's basically been designated as more of like a green space.
okay,
It's designed for, or it's can accommodate overflow parking,
yeah.
but there is no.
But it has been, it is R1 though. Is that, so it'll remain R1?
That's fine, yeah.
Yeah, okay,
That's
okay,
correct.
I just wanted a
That'll remain
clarification.
R1.
I thought that was what the case was, I
Yeah.
just wanted to make
Yeah.
sure.
Once again, I think the original parcel was a B2 or a B3 originally.
Yeah.
And we did change the front two to R3, and now I think we're just kind of transitioning from the R3 to the R2 to give us a little bit more flexibility.
Okay.
And I think it, once again, is more in keeping with the neighborhood, what's going on up there, and I think it's going to meet more the needs of what's going on residentially in the area.
So it's a logical, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay, so it's a logical zoning, in my opinion, for the area to go to R2 and allow for a little more density. I'm assuming you need that additional density in order to make the numbers work on the development of the property. The one concern that the administration has that I'm bringing to this board prior to them making a recommendation to the city council for changing the zoning is fire access to that back parcel with higher density versus an R1. Basically, there's just additional people and families that can be placed in the location if it is zoned R2. Right now, there's fire access is not possible to that really with an apparatus to that back parcel. And so I guess I'd ask your opinion or your question on how you would mitigate that particular risk.
Well, if I may.
Sure.
I saw the guy taking the
I just
pictures.
took a couple of pictures. This is the fire hydrant, and that's the driveway.
Yep.
So we've got a situation where the fire hydrant is about 60 feet from the property line.
It's better than my house.
I really wouldn't, I think, consider that as a major detriment.
That's Madison.
The parcels that are in further, I think, are a little bit more of a concern than this. If a truck parked right there on Madison, they would have to run a hose about 120 feet.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
I mean, I don't think that's a real stretch as it relates to maybe lots of parcels in the city where you park a fire truck on a street and you have I mean, if this was thousands of feet or 500 feet or some, number that was of a concern, we also have addressed this numerous times with Bob Troxel in the past with projects that had even more density, and they were good with the situation that exists. In one of the projects around 2010, they actually went and did flow studies on the hydrants, the one there on Spring and the one there on East State, and his quote was, "I reviewed the fire flow in the Madison East State area. There is sufficient fire flow for the project." So, once again, I think that we're, in a perfect world, there's fire hydrants everywhere that there needs to be, and I think this is the case. I think that the fire hydrant there on Spring Street is 60 feet from the property line.
Sure.
So,
So it's really a risk decision ultimately that the board and the council will make about changing the zoning in this particular situation, because it sounds like, there's not really a willingness to change the access in order to allow a truck to drive to that back portion from the property owner. And so really this board and then the council will have to make a decision whether or not we can assume the risk associated with firefighters dragging hose to that back property versus, having an ability to drive an apparatus all the way up to it. And so that's really our decision that we have to make. The current fire chief, recommends against it. But again, his job is to go and come up with the safest possible situation. And so all the time, we go and look at circumstances that the fire chief says, well, maybe something bad could happen. And we have to decide from a risk perspective whether or not it's significant, and then the decision makers make the decision. So I think that's really where we are. Did I phrase that correctly?
Yeah, I understand there's always, we have to consider everything, and the last thing I'd want to do is get involved in anything that would be considered unsafe. But once again, we have reviewed this numerous times over the years with projects that had a lot more density than 2 duplexes, considering there'll be new construction. The properties that are further into this loop, I think, would be a lot more of a concern than this is. This is the closest one to that hydrant. So, once again, it is your decision, but I do feel that we are within the reasonable tolerances to have.
It's not a city line there, is there?
So from a risk perspective, looking at that, you could go in there and build on those 2 parcels a single-family residence. And the second house would be obviously the furthest from Madison and be of greater risk trying to fight a fire or deal with something back there with a single-family residence. That could likely have as many bedrooms and as many people in the building as your duplex.
The 2 single-family residences probably would have had more.
Could conceivably have more.
Conceivably, absolutely.
So
And once again, it's
So
only
it's how much of a
160 feet.
risk, how much of a risk increase is there?
I'd say there's none.
Okay, just a thought.
My question is more of an aggravation question. I was wondering if you're going to increase the density up there on that pathway. It's a single lane road, isn't it, John? Pretty much.
Uh-huh.
And so I was wondering if you could put up some kind of sign or suggest that people use a loop. I know I've said that before.
Mhm.
I know it's-
Yeah, we've really had, up till now with everybody there, I mean, there really isn't that many people
Right.
to speak of, and there's never really been any issues with traffic flow, et cetera. People have learned to, once again, this configuration of how these properties were laid out was done so long ago that, it just is a situation that's always existed.
I wonder if you get aggravated enough, since it's a private road, with people having to back up and they start to yell.
We've never really had any problems. I mean,
Well, that's good.
because what
Good
we
tenants.
built, our 2 buildings that are there, the 2 new buildings, are right pretty much on East State and Madison. So people are in and out. So everything we've done so far, no one's going that way.
It isn't my question is just an aggravation question.
So far, no one's
Been aggravated,
expressed to me any aggravation.
Okay.
No road rage.
I
Right.
don't know, you never know.
Other comments or questions? No?
No.
All right. Yes.
If you'd allow me to point out that the BZA approved a rear yard setback reduction on these 2 R1 residential lots from 30 feet to 25 feet. We believe, my office believes that BZA setback would still apply if these changed from an R1 to an R2 zone.
It would still
Just
apply.
FYI.
Very good. Okay. All right, if there's no other comments, since this is a case,
No, I was going to move adoption.
that was the hand, okay. So there's a motion to adopt from Commissioner Bain.
Second.
There's a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
We have 4 yeas and 1 opposed.
Speaking for his fire chief.
Therefore,
Does this have to go to city council?
it does.
So that's,
Yeah, so then Yeah, that'll be the next step along the way. Since this has been approved by the planning commission, it'll go from planning commission on to city council, and city council will take it up for
Okay.
their final approval on rezoning to B2, or not B2, R2.
Well, thank you all very much for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Right. Moving on, communications, proposed changes to code.
Thank you, Mayor.
Correct.
Members of council, again, I'd like to discuss some proposed changes to the zoning code, Title 23. I'd like just to have those discussions today and then come back with some proposed recommendations to City Council on those changes. So if you don't mind, I know you haven't had much time to review those. If I could just discuss some of those, please.
Please.
So let's start with 230404. This is the B1 Neighborhood Business Zone. I'd ask that we, and this is kind of a cleanup on my part. We currently technically don't allow outdoor dining in a B1 or B3 zone because of 230404A1A, businesses in enclosed buildings. All businesses or services shall be conducted wholly within a completely enclosed building. I did a little bit of research. I can't really find that they had intended to, and maybe some people on the board with more history here, there was never any intent to exclude outdoor dining, but it does fall under that, that you can't conduct any business or services outside of a building. I would like to add outdoor dining shall be permitted in the B1 and the B3 zone. It doesn't show up in the B2 or the B2D or the M zone that we wouldn't allow services outside, provide services outside of an enclosed building, but it does in the B1 and B3. So I'd like to recommend those two changes to code. If you look, we have a lot of these outdoor dining areas throughout the city, as well as the parklets in the B2D and the B3 uptown. This would help make sure that those are allowed by our zoning code. So that would be my recommended change for there. If you jump down to 230407A3, we had recently had a mithril court case where the judge suggested we make some changes to the code. And here's my suggestions: that we change this to eating and drinking establishments permitted in a B3 zone, provided that restaurants with drive-ins, drive-throughs shall have the drive-in and drive-through at least 100 feet from any R1 or R2 zone. You'll notice I changed that from 200 to 100 feet. If you look up at the 230407A2, you could actually have a bottling and distribution station within 100 feet of our residential zone, but not a drive-through. And I thought that the idea would be that we were trying to keep the noise down, problem down as much as possible. So I went to the effort of taking a decibel meter and looking at a couple of drive-throughs, both the Sonic drive-through on Stimson and the McDonald's on Richland Avenue. Checked at 100 feet, and I couldn't find this difference between the background noise and the noise from the speakers coming from the drive-throughs at 100 feet. So to me, it seems like that would be reasonable and match the rest of the code. So that's going to be my recommendation for that.
Mr.
Yes, sir.
Riggs, or David, to point of clarification with the board, one of the aspects in the case that where the city lost its case related to this is that it talked about eating and drinking establishments, and the particular case is that the establishment wasn't an eating or drinking establishments. And so in order to provide some clarity here, David also provided that restaurants with drive-ins, drive-throughs.
David, I think that I remember when we looked at that one, and it was kind of about where Morris Avenue parallels Stimson, and where there's a very sharp change of area. I think in the interim period, there's been a lot of changeover. There's much more density and different types of people. I don't think the same people that complained about
I see.
Kentucky Fried or whatever
Yep.
is still there. So I don't have any problem.
Historically, I
with-
wondered if that's why some of the changes didn't occur in the 80s.
Yep.
Or late 70s, early 80s, when the KFC went in.
Yeah, and it's just people get aggravated. It's the aggravation problem.
Yes, it is.
To that point, David, with this change, I mean, I know that KFC currently would be a grandfathered non-permitted, or a grandfathered use, basically, what others would be non-permitted. With this change, would it be, or is it still too close?
It'd still be too close, as well as Sonic would still be too close if they were to provide their grandfathered in at this
Yeah,
point.
both of them are grandfathered, and both would need a variance
Yes.
even to this new.
Even with this new
Okay,
standard.
so just to kind of give the commission an idea of proximity and what that means as far as an existing place relative to an R1 or R2 zone.
Okay, then moving on, if no more questions, I'll move on.
Well,
to-
let me, look.
Yes, sir.
Back up. So on adding the outdoor dining shall be permitted, is that will that require enclosure? I know like on Court Street, obviously, it's not an enclosed space with those parklets but in the B1, I don't know, I'm not exactly sure how, but I just raised that as an issue because many of them might, and I know there's the Dora too that might have might be a piece of the puzzle, but, is there a need for any kind of enclosure language there?
I did not include any that would maybe be appropriate if you feel so inclined.
Well, I hear what you're saying. I've
Yeah.
seen sidewalk dining that has a little flower box kind of thing that's around it or something that designates that space. I mean, the other thing is that this does not change the ordinance that speaks to tables or chairs, being in front of the building, being in front of that business, but not to exceed 5 feet from the facade of the building.
Yeah, that still applies. This would be mostly would be in the uptown area, and that would be in our public right of way. So it doesn't speak to any public right of way use.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so my thing was more about things like Seoul or something, bigger outdoor areas, maybe on their own property if something develops at the shopping center there around Kroger's or something. I just wonder if there needs to be some language that, or you having the ability to make that decision, possibly, or, I mean, I don't know what it should be. I just raised that when I was looking at it.
Could you add the phrase, outdoor dining shall be permitted in a clearly delineated area? Something along those lines, and it doesn't require an enclosure per se, but does would require like some sort of designation to say this is where you eat, this is where you don't. Is that kind of what you're getting at, John?
I can certainly make that change. Yes, sir.
I mean, you don't want to prohibit places like Witt's, though, like that's a very nice setup.
No, I don't, in Court Street, I think in my mind, it's a little different animal, I think you do want to have some outdoor seating areas there.
But this would prohibit, or
Yeah, no,
put guardrails.
because that's in a B2D area in
Yeah.
the public right of way. This doesn't really apply to that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we're really talking about like East State Street in the vicinity of the Village Bakery, West End Tavern, or West End Cider House rather.
Gotcha.
And then the B3, all the stuff on East State Street on the north side.
Yep.
Okay.
So a lot of these places have already done this. It would just clean up our code to help match what's existing. And I think when it comes to our long bout with COVID, this is actually a healthier type of venue to eat outside rather than indoors.
I agree,
When
and
the
it
weather
would
permits.
encourage more people to eat outside during those kinds of situations too, or to dine in our, public facilities or our, businesses, I guess, and, yeah.
Okay.
All right, moving forward, if there's no more comments on those sections, 230602, certificates and permits. I'm trying to just clean up some of the old language in here. We do not have a certificate of health. We don't have a health officer, so we don't do certificates for those. So I'd ask to delete that. We do not do occupancy permits. You'd have to be a building department in order to do that, so legally we can't do that. And then if you go down, excavation permit, that's been replaced with our Title 27 land development permit, so we don't do that anymore.
We have a couple different places in the code for when this happens. Like, I mean, certainly utility companies, when they're doing work in the right of way, we have a whole provision for how we'd be permitting for that. So it's probably just superfluous.
And then in the next section, which used to be F, I've numbered to C. I've added a couple of sections down here which says, it's kind of a loophole that we have. I have to approve a permit whether or not it's complete. I want to be able to hold incomplete permits and not have to dispose of those. So if it's incomplete, it doesn't count our 30-day period for approvals. And I'm just trying in C and D to adjust that so that we can review and approve complete permits within 30 days, which is very doable for our office. Questions on that? And then comes the big one here that I've been working on the last few weeks, 230311, accessory structures. I'd like to add a section in here for accessory energy systems. And so if you look down, I've added section D, several pages, I think 4.5 pages of additional information. In general, we look at accessory energy systems as private systems on a property that currently has a use, and so this would be an accessory use. Solar, both ground-mounted and roof-mounted. We have geothermal, both open and closed systems, and then we also have wind-powered systems. So I've tried to make some code-effective permit rules for these and try to make them as open and expansive as we can, because we do want to have these accessory energy systems in the city. So this would be any kind of existing structure, residential, commercial, or business would be able to add these accessory energy systems in order to become energy efficient. As you can see, accessory energy systems are designed primarily for the on-site consumption of electric or heat exchange, and are accessory use to the existing structure. Would require a permit to be established by separate ordinance, permit fees by separate ordinance, a permit to be established for these. We actually do this for solar as an accessory use. We would just expand that, what we do right now. And then you see my information on roof-mounted solar. We want to point out that on a flat roof, which is subsection B, that these solar panels will be permitted up to 18 inches above the maximum height in the zone. So if it's a B3 zone, it could go up to 3.5 stories or 45 feet. It would allow actually 18 inches higher than that on a roof-mounted structure. We wanted to limit that so that you couldn't set 10 feet above a existing roof with your solar, and we think that this would fit almost every condition. We also are looking for emergency access. We want to point out that would not require additional screening, and that any solar access easement required to prevent the neighbor from shading a solar panel would be the responsibility of the property owner and not the city to acquire. Almost the same thing for ground-mounted solar. We did add a section on ground-mounted solar that lot coverage or impervious surface area. We have two sections in the bulk controls that limit the amount of coverage for accessory structures to 60% of the total lot. This would waive that if there's vegetative cover underneath those ground-mounted solar systems. We think that would still allow enough pervious area underneath the system that water could infiltrate and percolate into the soil, just like it did if the systems weren't there. So we think that would be a positive. Then if I could go on to the geothermal heating and cooling, there's actually two types of geothermal. One's an open system in which a well is drilled or a surface water source is located, and comes in and then discharges either to a well or to an open surface or as a closed system. So the open systems actually can bring water from the outside and discharge water to the outside, or bring water from the ground and discharge into the ground. Those are open systems. And we want to be careful with those types of systems when we're near the wellhead protection area, because there's a potential for them to pull pollutants and contaminants into the groundwater. So I'm trying to regulate that a little bit here just for the wellhead protection area. If it's a closed system, we're a lot less concerned about that. A closed system would actually be a piping system that could be either horizontal or vertical, and rotates with a type of fluid that's a heat exchange fluid. The only point I would like to make on that, if there is ammonia or other types of antifreeze that they use, I like the MSDS sheets to know what they are in case there's a failure that gets into the groundwater. And then finally, on the wind-powered systems, I'm suggesting that we make these conditionally permitted because they could be controversial depending on where they're located. So everything else is a permitted use in all zones with a few exceptions. For wind-powered systems, I would consider those. I would ask you to consider those to be conditionally permitted, so we get another layer of review and approval for those.
So the BZA would be the entity that then would hear if someone were seeking to get it. Is that correct? The BZA then would hear if there's something proposed.
Yeah, and because this is a zoning code, this conditional approval would need to go to BZA. That's correct. Yes.
Nice job with all this. A lot of work.
Learning a lot.
Do you want to talk about the Soul Smart designation? And why one of the aspects of this is...
I'm sorry, can you
want
repeat
to talk
that?
about the Soul Smart designation, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I don't know enough
Okay,
about that.
yeah, so one of the things that is a goal of the cities has been that we achieve this Soul Smart designation, which is I guess a credentialing entity. Sir, you may know more about it.
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, we are a Soul Smart city. We're currently at the bronze level. It is a system that recognizes communities that have cut through a lot of the red tape associated with residential alternative energies. It was grounded in solar. We as a community have done pretty well to achieve the bronze status. But bronze is just not good enough. So this is an effort to get us to silver and possibly even gold. I've been working with Soul Smart for a while to recognize our carbon fee, which has been in existence since 2018, and I'm going to give a lot of accolade to the work that you've put into this, Director Riggs. I find this vitally important to our community as we're on a mission to reduce our carbon emissions by 50% by the year 2030. That's 8 years from now. Something like this certainly helps. I think our future solar array at the community center in that area will also get us to that likely even more than 50% reduction in carbon emissions. So I do have a question about this, unless anybody wants any more information on Soul Smart. For the wind, might it be helpful to also require that as part of this conditional use, that they also provide evidence that they're, a wind study to show that where you're thinking of putting one actually will benefit you somehow? In my mind, for some reason, this is going back to 2010, 2011, way before I was even on city council, that someone had performed a wind study here in Athens County. We're a county of hills and hollers, and certainly there's high ground, but it might be worth exploring to add something like that in here? I know that when we're talking about a new cell tower going up somewhere, that they have to do a balloon study, so that everyone knows this site, this is what you're gonna be looking at, from all points. But I think to also and this isn't a height thing, has to do with, is the site that this individual or company or whatever that they want to have wind, have they done their due diligence to show that it's actually going to work?
So we did look into that a little bit. We think that there's probably limited use for solar wind power, especially for private systems. I don't know that there's one section that I'd like to add that I haven't got in here yet, and that's for principal energy systems, that the lot or parcel that these systems will be on would be the primary use to generate solar that would not be consumed on site. So this would be our solar arrays or maybe a wind-powered array. I don't think that is that probably won't, at this point doesn't work very well. It's not very efficient for this part of Ohio, but there may be areas where it would. There may be some areas where it could work, and you're correct. I'd like to see a wind study before we would approve that.
Yeah. It just seems to me that someone had done a wind study, whether it was Ohio University or someone, and it was, the data that came back was at least where they chose to monitor wind and wind patterns. It wasn't necessarily, we're not the best location.
Right.
Who knows? Mount Nebo.
Mount Nebo? Is that where it was?
So I have one question back on the solar.
That's what I was
So
gonna ask, too.
you exempt screening requirements. And I assume that's essentially for the panels so that you aren't reducing the effectiveness of the panels or something along that line. Is there ancillary equipment that goes with those panels that we should screen maybe in some instances, maybe on the ground or whatever? I mean, I don't know what our requirements are elsewhere in the code with regard to screening requirements, I guess, so.
Yeah, currently we only require screening for dumpsters, or solid waste dumpster areas, and if you're commercial abutting a residential or a business abutting a residential, the parking area is required to be screened, and that's
Okay.
the only places at this
So there's
stage
no
where-
equipment or anything that is required to be screened, rooftop equipment or anything like
Not
that
no, I don't believe
necessarily?
there is.
Okay, okay.
We
So
did have a
this would be consistent with that then,
Yeah.
for the most part?
Yeah, we did have a discussion about screening ground-mounted systems, especially if you're next to a residential, but we want to try to make these systems as open and available as possible. So we decided as a group that we would not include screening as a requirement for those.
I have a question. My first question is really small, but let me ask you, when you have neighbors agreeing, you can do it casually or you can do it with a written letter. Could you ask people who have standalone systems in their side yard and there aren't very many places you could put them in the city, I don't think, to document it?
Are we
Acceptance of it, where you would be looking at it all the time. People get all bent out of shape
They
about
do.
things.
Yeah, they do.
And-
And I see that particularly on the ground-mounted solar systems. The other systems, well, the wind power is going to be
Wind power is a mess.
visible as well, but the ground-mounted solar systems would be the ones where I could see the neighbor not liking it so well to have those systems in there.
I
And they
don't-
have every right, and as a neighbor, to put up a privacy fence if they don't like the
They
looks
could,
of
yeah.
it, so.
My other question is, will number 2 ground-mounted solar anyway affect the proposal that Hayes and other people have made for that area, and other than the potential pollution?
Yeah, so this is particularly talking about these private systems, the systems that don't sell to, it's not the big solar arrays, it's the private backyard systems. I do plan on having another section here for those primary systems where we were talking about the property at University Estates and OU. having a principal solar array that's designed not to be used on site, but to be distributed off-site into a substation and subsequently sold or reused. Those are actually different from these systems here, and this code change wouldn't apply to those type of systems.
Would it be more rigorous than what you have here?
Yeah, it would be different.
Different?
I think, to kind of caveat on that, we had some significant discussion on this, and we just weren't ready as we were working through this, to bring forward to this body, but I wanted to get something forward to start this discussion today, since ultimately the planning commission will have to approve these, and we'll get it in bits and pieces, but for those particular circumstances, I think we need to be cautious about, allowing those in M zones and B zones. And the reason I say that is that
That's all of them.
nobody pays income tax from a solar array. If all of our M zones and B zones in the city are turned into solar array, then nobody will pay any income tax in the city of Athens. And I know it won't happen, but,
I mean, we should,
and as a principally permitted use. Now, that said, if it's an ancillary use or an accessory use, like for instance, Walmart puts all the roof covered in solar array and all of their parking lot covered in solar array, it's still not a principal use. The principal use is the store underneath and the parking underneath, in which case it would be allowed. But I don't think we would want to say, tear down Walmart and just take and convert all of that M zone, because it's an M zone out there, to, where people pay income tax, to a solar array that sells electricity to somebody outside of Athens. But there are places that we could allow it, and that's the one that, that looks like is permitted, or that is gonna go through here for, to bring solar to Ohio University. So I think there's more work we have to do on this, but I think it's coming.
Yes.
I really do, and I think within the next 30 years, we're gonna see, as the production of the solar, kilowatts increases, as each of the panels increase significantly, and what they can produce, and the cost comes down, and the cost of electricity otherwise, because I think we're gonna see them everywhere. And so, I think this is great work, David, for us getting ahead of this, so thank you.
appreciate that, yeah.
If I could just tag on to that, one of the things we would look at for these primary systems would be where we would prefer to see those uses. So brownfield areas, old landfill areas, open space where you don't have typically a normal use for those would be our preferred spaces or preferred locations for those type of systems. We're looking into that and expect more in the future.
Any other questions?
Not for me. Good work, though, good
Yeah,
work.
this is outstanding work. I have to give a lot of applause to our community for doing what we are trying to do to decarbonize, our area. So this is another step to decarbonization.
So do we need a motion on this?
Not yet.
Not yet?
Just a
Okay.
This will be a communication.
Just a communication. Oh, that's right, okay.
And ultimately, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, David, but it will end up being, once we're ready, it'll be a movement, a motion to pass our recommendation on the changes to the zoning code when we're ready.
To city council, yes.
And then
Okay.
on to city council.
Okay. Good.
Okay, well, Director Riggs, you're not done yet. Any reports from Development and Code Enforcement?
I have nothing to report this afternoon.
Opportunities for citizens to speak. The only one here is Scott Thompson, sitting out there. Thank you, Scott, for running a marvelous government channel. Announcements, our next meeting will be September 1st, so keep that in mind, same time, same place. A motion to adjourn.
Second.
So moved, I guess. Did you, or do we?
I guess I made the motion.
You made the motion, okay, I didn't know.
We'll go with that. All in
Okay.
favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you.